why would Hewlett-Packard, form this massive long-term strategic alliance with Canon to build their laser printers?
Right, especially when Canon is actively fighting them in a global war for those exact same printer customers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it sounds like corporate sabotage. You are literally buying your most critical internal parts from your biggest rival.
It does sound crazy, but decisions like that are actually happening every single day in the background of the global economy.
So whether you are managing procurement for a Fortune 500 company, or you're just insanely curious about how massive organizations decide who gets their multi-million-dollar contracts, you are navigating the complex world of category strategy for sourcing.
Well said.
Thanks. Today, our mission in this deep dive is to decode how those global supply plans are built, how companies segment their suppliers, and, how they analyze their spend to keep the whole machine running without just completely collapsing under its own weight.
And that HP and Canon paradox you brought up.
Yeah.
It is the perfect starting point because it just shatters the illusion that corporate buying is only about finding the cheapest price in a catalog.
Right. It's not just clipping coupons.
No, not at all. We're looking at the underlying architecture of global sourcing today. It's really about understanding the leverage, the risk, and this incredibly complex calculus of who needs who more.
Yeah. And when an organization fails to structure its supply base properly, they end up wasting their best resources on, trivial items while completely ignoring the vital components that actually keep their business alive.
Exactly.
So to avoid that trap, it seems like a company needs a massive blueprint before they even, pick up the phone to call a vendor, like a master supply plan.
Right. They absolutely do.
But I always sort of assume these plans are just massive spreadsheets optimizing for the absolute lowest unit cost.
I mean, it is super tempting to reduce it to a math equation, but a supply plan really can't exist in a vacuum. It's actually the physical manifestation of a company's corporate strategy and culture.
Wait, really? Culture?
Yeah, before you buy anything, you have to answer the existential questions. So, for instance, you might have a corporate social responsibility policy that mandates supporting the local communities where you operate.
Okay, I've always wondered about that in practice, though. If a local supplier charges 10% more for raw materials than a supplier overseas, does the math eventually win out, or does the culture win?
Honestly, culture often wins, provided the cost difference falls within, a strategically acceptable threshold.
Okay, so they're not going to pay double, but they'll pay a premium.
Right. The business rationale is that the social capital, the local goodwill, and just mitigating long-distance shipping risks, that provides an intangible ROI that offsets the higher unit cost.
That makes sense. You can't really market yourself as a community-integrated brand while quietly offshoring every single component just to save, fractions of a cent.
Exactly. The overarching supply plan establishes those boundaries.
But a global plan with high-level boundaries is still just a philosophy, right? If a company is buying 10,000 different items, from highly engineered microchips to the cardboard boxes they ship in, they can't apply the exact same buying philosophy to all of it.
No, they can't.
Right.
And that is where the concept of categories becomes essential.
Categories?
Yeah, organizations take this massive universe of purchased goods, services, and suppliers, and they group them into specific categories. You can think of it like a product family, but instead of grouping the things you sell, you're grouping the things you buy.
Oh, I see. So it lets a company deploy completely different procurement strategies based on the actual nature of the material.
Exactly.
So if I'm visualizing, say, a major textbook publisher, their categories wouldn't just be book materials. I mean, they are buying advertising space, but they're also buying massive quantities of paper, industrial ink, and bookbinding glue.
Right. And don't forget labor.
Oh, true. They're sourcing contract labor freelance, graphic designers, editors, subject matter experts.
And managing those categories requires entirely different skill sets. I mean, the global commodities market for paper pulp fluctuates based on weather patterns and international tariffs.
Yeah.
But the market for a highly specialized freelance graphic designer, that's driven by portfolio quality and individual negotiation.
So if you try to use the same procurement team for both,
you will either wildly overpay for the paper or you'll just deeply alienate the graphic designer.
Which brings up a structural problem. If you have a multinational publisher with offices in London, New York, and Tokyo who is doing the buying.
That is the classic tug of war in supply chain design.
Centralization versus localization, right? Because if headquarters centralizes all the purchasing, they can negotiate a massive global discount on paper.
Yes, centralized control generates immense systemic savings through sheer volume.
But if London needs a specific type of local editor, headquarters in New York is going to be pretty much useless at sourcing that.
Exactly. Autonomous, localized sourcing provides agility. The local branch knows the cultural nuances, they know the regional players, and they can react a lot faster.
So a hybrid model has to be the only way that actually functions in the real world.
Usually, yes. A truly sophisticated supply plan will centralize the strategic sourcing, the categories where, big dollars and high risks are in play, but they'll grant local autonomy for the non-strategic sourcing.
As long as those local branches operate within the guardrails of the central policy, I assume.
You got it.
But that creates an immediate vulnerability. How do you objectively decide what is strategic and what is non-strategic? Because I guarantee you the person buying the office supplies thinks their job is just as critical as the person buying the microchips.
Oh, absolutely they do.
Yeah.
That's human nature. So procurement professionals use a mental model called portfolio analysis to strip away that bias.
Okay, portfolio analysis, how does it work?
It evaluates every single category based on two distinct axes: strategic importance and difficulty. Strategic importance measures how much this item impacts the final profit margin, the quality of the end product, and delivery reliability. Difficulty measures the complexity of the market.
Like how many suppliers even exist or how volatile the supply chain is.
Exactly.
Importance versus difficulty. So if we map that out, we end up with 4 distinct quadrants or types of materials. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit. Low strategic importance, low difficulty.
Right. Those are your standard commodity materials. Standard office paper, basic fasteners, electricity.
So things where the market is saturated with capable suppliers and the item itself doesn't uniquely impact your final product's value.
Precisely.
My instinct here is just to assign a junior buyer to go find the cheapest price every few months and just be done with it.
You could do that, but the administrative cost of constantly quoting and negotiating those trivial items will actually quickly erase the pennies you save.
Oh, I didn't think about the administrative cost.
Yet the sophisticated strategy for commodities is complete automation. You establish basic, long-term parameters, right-size the number of suppliers so you aren't managing 50 different paper invoices, and you just put the category on autopilot.
Okay, that makes sense. What if an item is still low in strategic importance, but highly difficult to get?
Now you are dealing with bottleneck materials.
Bottlenecks.
Yeah. These are fascinating because they shouldn't dictate your business, but they can completely paralyze it.
Give me an example.
Imagine a specialized chemical needed to clean manufacturing equipment. It doesn't make the product better, it doesn't drive profit, but there are only 2 factories in the world that produce it. If you run out, your entire assembly line stops.
Wow. A low-cost item holding a multi-million-dollar process hostage. So how do you get out of that trap?
Well, your primary goal is simply ensuring fulfillment. You might lock in guaranteed volume contracts, even if you overpay slightly, just to ensure you never run dry.
Paying a premium for peace of mind.
Exactly. And simultaneously, your engineering team should be actively trying to design that bottleneck material out of your process entirely.
Or, I guess, actively helping to develop new suppliers to break the monopoly.
Yes, that too.
Okay, now let's flip the axes. What if the material is incredibly high in strategic importance, but low in difficulty?
This is the dream scenario for procurement. These are leverageable materials.
Leverageable, so they represent a massive portion of your spend and deeply impact your profit. But the market is just flooded with highly capable suppliers.
Right, because the difficulty is low and the competition is high. The buyer holds all the power.
So you have the leverage.
Precisely. Your goal is to optimize cost and quality by creating a small pool of preferred suppliers and basically making them compete for your massive volume.
Just maintaining enough tension in the market to keep prices sharp without sacrificing quality.
You nailed it.
Which leaves us with the final and clearly the most dangerous category. High strategic importance combined with high difficulty.
Direct or core competency materials.
That's right.
These are the components that define your product's value to the end consumer. And there are very few suppliers capable of producing them.
So we're talking about custom-engineered microchips, proprietary software integrations, specialized engines.
And this brings us right back to Hewlett-Packard and Canon.
Ah, okay. Let's unpack that. Canon possessed the exclusive engineering capability to manufacture the internal laser print engine. And HP had the software, the interface, and the massive market distribution.
Exactly. That engine is the ultimate high-importance, high-difficulty item for HP.
And that's why they formed a strategic alliance, despite being competitors.
Because if HP tried to treat Canon like a replaceable commodity supplier, haggling over pennies or threatening to leave, Canon would simply walk away.
Because they have other options, or they just don't need the hassle.
Right. But the economics of co-opetition tied them together. Canon needed HP's massive market share to justify their billions in R&D, and HP needed Canon's engine to have a product at all.
So mutual survival dictated a deep integrated partnership. It's almost like mutual hostage-taking.
It kind of is.
But I have to imagine companies ignore this framework all the time, right? Like, they look at a highly critical, difficult component and decide to play hardball anyway just to juice their quarterly margins.
Oh, they do. And the fallout is usually catastrophic.
Really?
Yeah. When you buy a highly critical core competency item at arm's length just to chase a lower unit cost, you inevitably pay for it somewhere else.
Like where?
The hidden costs. Inspecting cheap goods for defects, the cost of warranty repairs, and the irrevocable damage to your brand's reputation. That will quickly eclipse whatever superficial savings you squeezed out of the supplier.
Wow. Okay, so portfolio analysis gives us a really clear-eyed view of exactly how much we need the supplier, but relationships are inherently two-sided.
Very true.
We might realize a supplier is absolutely critical to our survival, but what if they look at our account and just shrug?
Well, that is the nightmare scenario for procurement. And it's why analyzing your own leverage is only half the job. You have to evaluate the landscape from the supplier's perspective, using a segmented sourcing strategy. You have to figure out how desirable of a customer you actually are.
But how does a company actually measure that? Because every salesperson is going to tell you that you're their favorite client.
You measure it based on two objective criteria: strategic alignment and revenue percentage.
Okay, so first, do your purchases align with the supplier's future technological and strategic direction?
Yes. And second, what percentage of their total business do you represent? Generally speaking, if you account for 5 to 10% of a supplier's total revenue, you are objectively important to them.
So just like the materials, we can map ourselves into 4 distinct customer profiles.
Exactly.
Okay, so if we align highly with their future plans and we represent a huge chunk of their revenue, we are a core customer.
That is the gold standard. If you're a core customer, the supplier views your success as deeply intertwined with their own.
So they'll prioritize you.
Oh, definitely. They will dedicate their top account managers to you, customize their production lines, and actively invest their own capital to keep you competitive.
Okay, what if we align with their future strategy, but we are currently just a tiny blip on their revenue radar?
Then you are a development customer.
Development.
You don't have the volume yet, but the supplier views you as an incubator. They know your technology or market position is the future of their industry.
So they might offer disproportionate resources or favorable pricing to help us grow.
Exactly, knowing they'll capture that big volume later.
Nice. But the bottom half of this matrix is where it gets treacherous, right?
Yeah.
If we have low alignment with their future and low volume, we are a nuisance customer.
It's a harsh term, but it is totally accurate. The supplier keeps you around because you provide marginal revenue, but you will never be prioritized.
So when supply chains tighten or shortages happen,
Your orders will be the very first ones delayed or canceled.
ouch. Okay, that leaves the final profile, which I think is the most dangerous trap in business. You represent a massive percentage of their revenue, but you have zero alignment with their long-term strategy. You are an exploit customer.
That is the technical term, and it operates exactly how it sounds.
It's like wandering into a tourist trap restaurant near a major monument. The restaurant knows you are never coming back. They have no incentive to build a long-term relationship, provide excellent service, or offer fair prices.
That's a great analogy.
They're just going to overcharge you for a mediocre meal to maximize short-term profit because they have you captured for that single moment.
And the corporate equivalent is just as predatory. The supplier knows you are highly dependent on them for volume, but they also know you aren't part of their strategic future.
So they'll systematically raise prices, degrade service levels, and bleed your margins.
Right, fully aware that the switching costs for you to find a new high-volume supplier are temporarily just too painful.
Wow. If I realize my company is an exploit customer, I'm quietly hitting the panic button. What is the strategic play to get out of that?
You really only have two options. You either fundamentally alter your buying patterns to align with their new strategy, which is often impossible, or you execute a silent, deliberate exit strategy.
Silent exit strategies.
Yeah. You use the time they are exploiting you to secretly develop alternative suppliers, or you re-engineer your product so you no longer need their specific component.
It really emphasizes how the spectrum of buyer-supplier relationships isn't just about friendliness. It is dictated by mutual need.
Absolutely.
Like if I'm buying a commodity as a nuisance customer, I'm just writing a check in a purely transactional relationship.
Exactly. And as the mutual need increases, the relationship deepens. Leverageable items require a preferred relationship with ongoing medium-term contracts.
And core competency item.
Those demand strategic partnerships, where you're integrating IT systems and sharing proprietary data. And at the extreme end of the spectrum, you have full ownership.
Right, where the mutual need is so absolute that you just simply acquire the supplier through a merger.
You buy them out.
I'm visualizing the sheer scale of this now. A global corporation has centralized and localized supply plans. They have divided their purchases into dozens of categories. They have suppliers mapped out across 4 different quadrants of importance, and they're simultaneously trying to navigate whether they are a core customer or an exploit customer.
It is a staggering amount of complexity to manage.
Right. If an organization has let this grow organically over 10 years, how do they clean up the mess?
Well, they conduct a rigorous supply-based analysis, which inevitably leads to a process known as right-sizing.
Oh, I have to call a timeout here.
Okay, why?
Right-sizing sounds suspiciously like polite corporate speak for indiscriminately firing vendors to save a quick buck. It has the exact same energy as a company saying they are right-sizing their workforce, which is just PR for massive layoffs.
I completely understand the skepticism, and unfortunately it is sometimes misused that way.
Right.
But pure strategic right-sizing is about finding the mathematically and strategically ideal number of suppliers for a given category.
Ideal number.
Yes. And the critical nuance is that the ideal number is not automatically a lower number.
Wait, so you might right-size a category by actually adding vendors?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The process begins with a spend analysis. That's a forensic retroactive review of every single dollar spent over the past year.
Okay.
You categorize all that disparate data to see where the money is actually flowing.
This is where Pareto analysis comes into play, right? The 80-20 rule.
Correct. You rank the spending categories from highest to lowest. The brutal reality of supply chain economics is that 80% of your spend is usually concentrated in 20% of your categories.
So identifying those vital few categories is crucial.
Yes, because a 1% efficiency improvement in a top-tier category will generate millions in bottom-line savings. Optimizing the trivial many at the bottom of the list won't even cover the cost of the analyst doing the math.
So we've identified the top categories. We know where the money is. How do we determine if the current number of suppliers in those categories is actually right or wrong?
You combine your internal demand forecasts, what your engineers and salespeople tell you they need next year, with intense market research.
What kind of research?
You study commodity price trends, you monitor geopolitical risks, you interview the sales teams of your current suppliers to gauge their capacity. You essentially build a comprehensive picture of the market conditions.
Okay, so if I do all that research and realize we are using 50 different packaging suppliers globally when we really only need 10, the impulse is to aggressively slash the bottom 40. But doesn't that inherently make the supply chain more fragile?
It does. You are balancing 2 opposing forces here. Consolidating your spend down to fewer suppliers massively reduces your administrative overhead, fewer contracts, fewer quality audits, fewer invoices.
And it makes you a much larger, more critical customer to the surviving suppliers.
Which earns you better pricing and leverage.
But the opposing force is risk.
Precisely. If you consolidate down to a single supplier for a critical component to get the ultimate volume discount, and that supplier's factory burns down, or, say, a pandemic shuts down their shipping ports, your entire company halts.
Man.
Right-sizing is about finding the exact number of suppliers that maximizes your purchasing leverage while maintaining enough geographic and operational diversity to mitigate catastrophic risk.
So how is this actually executed? You don't just send out an email blast terminating vendors.
No, it requires highly specific, measurable goals. You establish a timeline, perhaps saying, we will consolidate our global packaging suppliers by 25% over the next 8 months as current contracts expire, aiming to capture a specific dollar amount in volume discounts.
It seems like the smartest play would be to never let the supply base get bloated in the first place.
That is the holy grail of procurement. But supply bases naturally grow too large, one new supplier at a time.
Just slow creep.
Yeah. An engineer designing a prototype finds a specialized part from a random vendor online. They build it into the final design, and suddenly the procurement team is locked into a brand new, unvetted supplier for the next 10 years.
So how do you stop it?
The only way to stop supplier creep is to embed supply chain managers directly into the early stages of product development. Force engineers to utilize existing preferred suppliers whenever possible.
This completely changes the way you look at corporate infrastructure.
Well,
We started with the foundational blueprint, how corporate culture and high-level strategy dictate the initial supply plan. We explored how dividing purchases into distinct categories allows for targeted strategies, separating the automated commodities from the fiercely difficult core components. We analyzed the harsh reality of the customer desirability matrix, recognizing that relationships are driven by mutual alignment and volume, not just goodwill.
exactly.
And finally, we unpacked how relentless spend analysis is required to continually prune and right-size the supply base, balancing the pursuit of leverage against the realities of global risk.
And, the underlying philosophy here extends far beyond industrial procurement. Whether you're managing global logistics or just leading a small team, the disciplines are identical.
How so?
You have to ruthlessly categorize what is truly strategic versus what is just operational noise. You have to objectively assess your leverage in every partnership, and you must constantly evaluate where your resources are flowing to ensure you aren't being exploited by legacy systems.
Which brings up a fascinating thought for you to consider as we wrap up today. We talked about how massive corporate supply bases bloat and degrade one new supplier at a time, without anyone really noticing.
Yeah, the slow creep.
Think about your own personal supply base. Look at your monthly subscriptions, the redundant software tools you pay for, the external contractors or services you rely on to manage your life or your department. If multinational systems lose millions of dollars through the slow creep of unmanaged additions, what does your personal spend analysis look like?
That's a great question.
Are you actively treating your resources like a core strategic asset, or are you just passively buying on the market because it's easier? It might be time to pull your own data, run your own Pareto analysis, and launch a personal right-sizing initiative. You might be shocked by how much leverage and capital you can claw back. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.